Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Before we start, I want to thank my latest Patreon subscriber, Howell, for his support as well as all my other Patreon subscribers. If you would like to support the podcast financially and gain access to exclusive companion mini-episodes, articles, group Zoom meetings, 2 brand new series of interviews, or even conducting lessons from me, head over to patreon.com/A Mic on the Podium, where you'll find 6 different levels of subscription starting at just £5 a month. Alternatively, go to justgiving.com, search for A Mic on the Podium, and make a one-off donation there. Details are in the show notes below. Today, I conduct a conversation with a Swedish conductor who's taken up conducting relatively recently and also relatively late in his life. He has already guest conducted with many high-profile orchestras, but is probably better known as being the preeminent trumpet soloist of his generation. It's a very great pleasure to welcome Håkan Hardenberger. Håkan, it's wonderful to see you and to speak to you today. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. Great to see you too.
With everybody, I go right back to the beginning, Håkan, and ask them how music first came into your life. Do you come from a musical family? How did it first appear?
I don't come from a musical family at all, actually. I think all the records that were in the house were sort of James Last dance records. But my father did like jazz, to listen to jazz. And he once, the night before Christmas, he was wondering what to buy for me as a Christmas gift. And he was walking the streets in Malmö, and he remembered he'd been to a concert with Louis Armstrong back in the 50s. This was now, we're talking 1968, so it was not, anyway, so he went in and he bought a very, very cheap trumpet indeed. And they had to even mend it with sort of Scotch tape. But it was a real trumpet, which was very good. It was not a toy, And then they asked in the shop who could possibly teach, and that was an incredible stroke of luck, because they said, "Oh well, there's this second trumpet of the Malmö Orchestra. His name is Bo Nielsen," and he then turned out to become one of the great pedagogues of our time. And I was, 8 years old and started to play the trumpet, and lightning struck.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Fortuitously being introduced to a teacher such as that. And how long, I mean, I don't know what the Swedish tradition is. I mean, in this country, for instance, above a certain point of the UK, if you play the trumpet, or the cornet, your more than likely first experiences in ensembles will be in a brass band. I don't know whether you have those in Sweden, or whether you would have been in town bands or like a wind band or straight into orchestras. What were your first ensemble experiences?
Well, it's funny because, I mean, Bo's teaching was very, very intense, first of all. We have in Sweden, and we already had then, a sort of system in the schools, but there you would get maybe 10, 20 minutes short lessons, but his lessons, they were 1.5 hours and very tough ones. I remember my parents sitting in and listening to like the second one, but they couldn't take it after that. They thought it was very tough. But I really loved it from the word. And I guess there is the mystery of music for you. And then we lived in a village, and there was like a village band. We don't really have in southern Sweden the brass band tradition. There are a few brass bands, but not as heavy as in Britain, and also not the wind band tradition that they have in, let's say, Norway.
Yes.
But we did have a little village band, with the sort of the mayor played the tuba, and one of my school friends played the clarinet. It was all, I think we were only about 15 of us, but all through the ages. And I asked Bo if can I join that? And he was very, very suspicious, because he thought, all that out of tune playing would not do me any good at all. So it's, as long as I was very careful, I was allowed to join. I guess maybe even there, the sort of first soloistic seed was started. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed playing with others, but I did not have all that many opportunities early on. And they did form a little brass ensemble, like a sort of brass ensemble academy, the players from the Malmö Orchestra, and I did join that, and I did play in the summers in a few youth orchestras, but I practiced a hell of a lot. I mean, already when I was like 12, I think I practiced about 4 or 5 hours a day. I mean, I really loved playing the trumpet. And also, I think that was a particular quality of his teaching, that he made you really enjoy the sort of handcraft part of it, and to feel joy in the practice side of things, and so I got off to a good start in that way.
Well, first of all, the things that spring to my mind there is, you know, if your second lesson is an hour and a half long and you're under 10 years old, already he's giving you lessons in stamina, if nothing else, because that's not normal, is it, for a sort of 9-10-year-old child to be playing the trumpet for an hour and a half in a lesson? And then if you're practicing at the age of 13, 14 for that amount of time, again, you're building up stamina, you're building up your chops, which that's now a phrase used for in many aspects of life, but it's actually really does belong to brass players, to build up your chops.
I heard a tremendous compliment the other day from some American players. They said, Håkan doesn't have chops, he has steaks.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's the sort of compliment you don't mind telling about yourself, isn't it? That's great. And so I'm assuming you stayed with that same teacher, the second trumpet of the Malmö Orchestra, all the way until you left Sweden and went to the Paris Conservatoire and studied there.
Yeah, so it kind of, I was with him for 8 or 9 years, but I wasn't. And then we have our normal school until 9 years of regular school, and then we go to high school and then to university level. I was allowed to go straight into the Malmö Academy when I finished my 9 years of school, but that was only to gain enough age so that I could go to Paris, because that was kind of had been decided. It was funny. We always thought I would go to Chicago because that's where Adolf Hirsen was. And the brass playing of the Chicago Symphony was really the model of the time. And to orchestra playing was sort of the only option for a trumpet player in those days. So I was even saving money in a little bank book called the Chicago book, and saving money every week so that I could go to Chicago. And then I met Pierre Thibault in one of those summer schools or summer courses, and really I thought this has to be so. And in a way, my parents, I think, were happy, because it was a little easier to send a 17-year-old to Paris than to Chicago, even if I think it was still quite courageous of them to send me to Paris at that age. So I entered the Paris Conservatory when in 78, 17.
And when you were there, were you now already on a fast track to becoming what you eventually became, which is a preeminent trumpet soloist, or were you like so many people are at music college or at conservatoire, were you forced to play in the symphony orchestra on a Friday afternoon? I can just imagine a trumpet section with you sitting on first trumpet. That would be pretty awesome. I mean, did any of that happen? And if so, who at any point did conducting even enter your head at this stage? I
mean, we will come to this much later, but
yes.
but I'm really honored to be invited, because I'm really the most accidental conductor you will ever have on your show. No, I came to Paris, and I still thought that you become an orchestral player. That's what you do. But I would say the one thing with Thibaut's teaching was that it was limitless, also in its demands. I mean, he had a huge heart, and he was the kindest person, but the demands were enormous. And the more he got, the more he wanted, and then already still in the first year, towards the end of the first school year, there was an international competition in Paris in the name of Maurice André. So Thibaut told me, prepare the pieces of the first round, and just to see what the competition is like, just to learn. So I did that, and then I was retained to the second round. And there, luckily, it was some pieces that I had at least played before. And then, we thought, nice, that was a good experience, thank you. And they were announcing the names for the final, where you were supposed to play the Jolivet concertino. So we hear my name. And I remember Thibaut looking under, he had these shades on, and he says, "This is Jolivet. You know the Jolivet concertino?" I said, "No, I'm sorry." He said, "We have 5 days à la cave, so down in the basement of his house, and try to learn the Jolivet in 5 days." But I did, during that competition, I got, I suppose, a little bit the poison in me that people were, I noticed that people were listening to what I was doing. And I had tried in school and in some amateur levels to play in orchestras, and I did feel somehow more comfortable playing all the time rather than waiting and thinking about how difficult it was. So it started, and then there was the Munich competition, and so the competitions were, however, in a way, strange they are. They are good for some things. You make incredible friends for life. You get a sense of where you are somehow.
Yes.
And you get a sense of if people want to listen to you, and you get a sense of having to learn 10 pieces at the same time, have them ready, and how a piece is really ready, not sort of ready as you think is okay for, it's a completely different. So that I learned with them, and then with the Munich one, I was invited to play in Berlin and the Philharmonic Hall, and I played the Haydn Concerto, and just the fact of my instrument being taken up by this other instrument, the beautiful concert hall, and what that is.
Yeah,
that is the Stradivarius, and then when that happened, then I was hooked. Then I thought, this is what I want my life to be.
It sounds very much like you had a similar experience to 2 or 3 of the conductors I've interviewed here about competitions where they turned up. Andrew Litton talks about thinking, I'll get through I'll get knocked out in the first round, I'll have a week sightseeing in London and fly home. And quite a few of those conductors have said the same. Obviously, some of them took the competitions very seriously, but some of them really did. They won it, having entered, thinking, well, if I get through the first round, it's a bonus. The other thing that you reminded me of was Daniel Harding talking about how conducting first really entered into his mind, which was sitting, playing second trumpet in an orchestra and counting bars rest and thinking, well, if I had the score, I don't need to count the bars rest. And then he got hooked on trying to work out what the conductors were doing. But it sounds like you had a different approach, which is, well, rather than counting bars rest and panicking about what I sound like when I come in, I'd just rather play all the time. Well, that's a perfectly acceptable way. And then you left Paris and went to Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yeah, I went home basically, but
Right.
I knew I absolutely wanted to study with Tom Stevens at some point.
Yeah.
And he was, of course, the solo trumpet of the LA Orchestra, and he had a sort of control. He was also very much into modern music. I already liked that side of things, and I knew I had to study with him. And I thought his control came, maybe he was doing yoga, or maybe that it was like a mental control thing.
Yeah.
But it turned out it was all through reading music properly, seeing structures, seeing he would do crazy things, tell me to transpose into some impossible key, and then he would count me in and then change what I should transpose at the very last moment. And I was not allowed to stop. So my mind would be going crazy trying to play the right notes, but he would insist on the phrasing.
Wow.
So almost like fooling the brain into, and then he had all these sort of, he calls them the Vacchiano rules from his teacher, and they actually go back to Louis Mager, who was a French trumpeter who came to play in the Boston Symphony. So, and they are sort of phrasing rules, if you like. And then I remember, because that's probably when it came into my mind the first time, because he said, you don't really need this as a trumpet player, but the day you get stick poison, you will.
It's funny, and people give it all sorts of names. Stick poison. My friend in the CBSO, the timpanist, he said to me, "You've got stickitis. You have, which is exactly the same thing." And of course, he was right. Once I'd been bitten, it was there was trouble ahead.
I never thought. I remember when he said that I laughed and said, "Oh, that's never ever going to happen." And for many years it didn't.
No. Well, we'll come to when you first took your first sip of stick poison a little bit later on. But going on now, you go out and start becoming the preeminent trumpet soloist, as I called you before, and of course, what you're also not just Haydn's and Hummels, what you're really noted for is commissioning and being involved with world premieres of new works. Burt Whistle. In fact, I remember the first time I ever heard you play live. I was playing in an orchestra in Birmingham, and you did "Endless Parade" by Harrison Birtwistle. Takamitsu, Henze, Turnage, Gruber, another piece I played in the orchestra for you. How do you go about choosing, when you want to commission, choosing a composer? I mean, people like Gruber you've worked with 2 or 3 times, but do you hear a new composer's music elsewhere, maybe on the radio or a CD, or do people suggest to you maybe that this new composer would be wonderful to write a trumpet concerto for you? How does it work?
Well, there was one person in the very beginning of all this who turned out to be of, I think, as much importance as any of my teachers. And it's turned out when I played, I think that was even my very first contracted concert as a soloist here with the Malmö Orchestra playing the Haydn. They engaged as a conductor Elgar Howarth.
Yes, yeah.
And Elgar Howarth was, of course, a trumpet player who became a conductor. And he also was the conductor who premiered Ligetis Grand Macabre. He did all the Birtwistle operas. He was very heavily involved with London Sinfonietta. And when I talked to him about my dreams for the trumpet, I mean, I realized that if I wanted to live as a soloist, a long life as a soloist, there was no way I could go around playing Hummel every week. I would be brain damage.
Exactly.
And so I absolutely needed stories to tell, actor in search of a part. So to him, as he has put it, that was music to his ears. And he then, I'm sure he and Philip Jones, they've never ever sort of taken credit for what I think they did behind the scenes for me in the beginning. I mean, why did BBC Proms engage me and commissioned a Gordon Cross concerto, for an unknown 25-year-old trumpet player? I think they must have had something to do with that. But then, very importantly, Gary played a tape, I think it was, of me playing to Bert Whistle. And Bert Whistle had this idea of the endless parade. And as you were pointing out before, one of my things was that I have this stamina. I can play for quite some time. And so it suited his idea. So he had a commission for a piece by Paul Sacher in Zurich. And Bert Whistle said, well, I want to write this trumpet piece. And Sacher said, well, for whom? Well, there's this Swedish kid. And Sacher said, well, no way. He'd never heard of me, of course. So Bert Whistle said, well, there's no piece then. Which I thought,
brilliant.
And of course that became the first incredibly important piece. And still is today. I mean, it's a fantastic piece. It feels just as strong now as it did then. And then Gary was also the one to put me in contact with Hense, with Ligeti, with Gruber, with Takemitsu. But of course, we also discussed a lot what I liked, but he became someone who could really point me in their direction and introduce me, which is very important. And then I think things have grown organically. I was in Australia playing Gruber, and there was Brett Dean, and you sit down and talk, and you realize that you have the same aesthetics, if you like. I was always one who wanted different trumpet concertos. They should always write what they want, but of course, if you have the same aesthetic, if you like pulse, and if you like not talking about tonality, but expressive intervals, if you want, then you will easier find a common language. And then sometimes it's just nice to be confronted with something that is maybe not at all what you think you will like, and then you might end up loving it. It's I think every single piece of the ones been written for me have a very different story, and I try to be very sensitive to how they want to work. I mean, Gruber wanted to discuss every little trick that I could offer, and I happily offered to him because I knew he would make it into poetry.
Which he did. I mean, that aerial concerto is amazing. I was just about to say, your choices of composers are, in the pieces I've played, I remember playing when you've been the soloist, either BCMG or CBSO, the Bert Whistle aerial, the Brett Dean piece, which the name escapes me, but I'm sure you'll tell me, they're all wonderful pieces. And as you say, they all tell a different story in a different way. But yeah, that aerial, I mean, I love it all, but the second half, when you're diving in and out of your music stand with mutes sort of clipped. Absolutely amazing piece of music. But you pull slides out. You're playing is it a Swedish cow horn or some sort of cow horn? Swedish cow horn. Amazing piece.
Yeah, no, I think you. That's what I try to tell students also, that it's so important to try to build your palette, as a good cook would build his palette, and to not just accept what's being put in front of you. And I think if I ever had any gift, I think that was possibly because I remember when I was very, very young trumpet player, of course, everybody idolized Maurice Andre, but I also, but then I like that, and I like Clifford Brown's dexterity in the jazz, and I like and when Miles plays without vibrato, and the passion of Doc Schitzer in Russia, and I guess I was building my palette, and I remember saying that in an interview, something that all these different, what I wanted to. So when I came to Stevens in LA, he said, "Okay, I read that interview. The first thing we have to do is to have an operation made. We have to take away half of your brain."
Oh, he sounds like quite a character.
Oh, he was definitely. Yeah.
I'm going to link in Elgar Gary Howarth in his conducting capacity, because I seem to remember he was conducting when I played in that performance of the Burt Whistle in Birmingham. My next question to you, and we're getting nearer and nearer the moment when you're injected with stick poison, is you would have done that piece with him many times. I know also, for instance, when you came to Birmingham, it was more often than not with Andris Nelsons as conductor on the podium, and the two of you are obviously very good friends. I'm sure you have other regular conducting collaborators. Did you, through this time, now your career as a trumpet soloist, were you aware of what they were doing and how they were handling orchestras? And now, if you look back in hindsight, do you think, do you know what? I know that I get that little trick from Andris, or I get that little trick from Gary Howarth. How did those regular collaborators influence you?
Well, very, very much. And I mean, even ones that were not regular collaborators, and even watching, you learn a lot from what works, but you also learn a lot from what obviously doesn't work.
Absolutely.
And then, as far as conducting comes, I mean, from Gary, I certainly learned both as a player, as a performer, the calm, the collected calm, and what that can create in sort of retained temperament that you can. I mean, you remember Gary when if he was getting angry, it was like a volcano. But he would be calm, and then it would explode. But I mean, it would mostly be calm, and he would always keep me very calm just before a performance, for instance. Or I used to, in the beginning of my career, I used to stay with him and his wife Mary in London, and let's say I was going to play at the proms, and I would be very nervous, and he had such good things to say. You have to take for granted that you are in good shape, and even if you're not in your best, you still have you. So he had all these very calm, sensible things to think about, and I learned a lot of that from him. And what's also obvious is that the ones, I mean, of course, there are principles of conducting, but some of the best ones, they make all the mistakes in that book, and it still works fantastically well.
Absolutely, yeah.
That you learn also, and that's good for the. I remember when I was starting to conduct, and I said to Gary, "Do you think I should film myself?" And he said, "No, it's too late." Which is also good advice in a way, because if you get too self-conscious about how am I moving, what does it look like, then you're already into the vanity trap.
Yes, yeah.
And you risk not conveying anything.
I mean, I've seen videos recently of myself conducting that have been put up online from things I've done. And I look at them now as somebody who teaches conducting. I look at them and think, "Oh God, what you're doing this, you're doing that." Well, and I eventually have to turn them off, because I then start doing that vicious circle of analysing myself and thinking, well, rather than just being in the moment and doing it, which is how I've survived as a conductor now, since 2005. Yeah, I mean, I use video a lot for teaching, but then that's because I'm giving them technical advice on their beating, and it's at the right stage. I think when there comes beyond a certain point, if you start looking at yourself again, it's dangerous. But then, you look at Daniel Harding. He was telling me that he started having lessons again when he was 35.
Yeah, and he changed. I mean, I worked with him before and after.
Yeah,
and he has been also one of the regulars where I really enjoyed, and I must say his development has been incredible. And I think you can learn from all of them. I mean, yes. As we can learn from almost all of our if we are perceptive, you can learn from almost every situation. And of course, as you know, I mean, the most important of all in conducting is the psychology. Yes. Between conductor and orchestra. And when you having been 40 years in between in that field of electricity, I have noticed so many times when that goes extremely well or when that goes very, very, very wrong because of an unnecessary rude word or not picking up that this orchestra does not function like that at all, or from the other side, from. I mean, my wife works in the recruiting business as a consultant, and she says, when I said it's the first time I conduct this orchestra. And she said, well, it will be just like a job interview. They will have decided within 7 seconds if they like you.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I remember going back and delving into my memories of playing, 10:15 on a Monday morning with a conductor we'd never seen before. Yeah. I mean, I would be quite generous. I'd give them 15 minutes. But I know, I do know one of my friends who said that he saw the whole orchestra sort of drop their heads after one downbeat in one Monday morning, and that's how quick it can be, and it's brutal. That whole guest conducting / beauty contest, which is what it is to a degree, or what it can be. So come on then, when did you first take that sip of stick poison? What was the first time you did it and thought, and then how was it suddenly, right, I need to do more of this, or did you just think, did it just slowly grow and grow?
It completely slowly grew and grew. I mean, I sort of never took any decision. It's been like a weed, a plant that grows, or a cactus. I give it no sunshine and no water, and it's still alive. I think it started actually doing master classes and making people play. Yeah. And noticing that if I was monkeying around in the right way, I could infuse immediate energy in the player. And there was a sort of joy in that it's not necessarily verbal. I am quite in teaching. I noticed I liked to be physical like that.
Yes, yeah. And use a lot of body language and hand gestures and
sing and so. Yeah. So then the next step, I guess, was also in teaching, in that I would have little groups of players, and for instance, during Soldier's Tale or something like that, wanting them to play Soldier's Tale, or wanting them to play the Gunther Schuller Symphony for Brass, and then I just tried if I could do that, and then of course liking it, then enjoying. And there we come back to, I think, Tom Stevens again, because you know this, when we see a really good score and life kind of comes out of the page like something in a Harry Potter movie.
That's right. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
and that incredible way of then looking at the score and seeing that live and trying to transmit it. I think it must be very similar for somebody who's been an actor for many years and then starts to direct plays or movies, and to just look at the text not more intensely or more carefully, but slightly different angles.
Yes,
if you see
with a different pair of spectacles on. You see it differently. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And it's a wonderful analogy. Yeah,
and I also, of course, over the years, I always felt real big sense of responsibility from the position that was given to me as a trumpet player. You know, I had all these opportunities, and I got to make records, and I remember one of my first tours in Germany where, you know, they wanted me to do the usual thing, you know, go around Germany and play 3 little Baroque concertos, and I thought, well, fine, I like the Baroque, but I want to have one new piece in there. And I told the Schmidt agency that, you know, and they started to look difficult. And I remember asking Bo, I said, do you think I should insist, or should I back off and just do what they asked me to do? And I remember very well, because he said, if you don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yes. Yeah.
And from that day, that's how I thought about recordings, about, you know, to sort of balance that and try to see to that we have a proper repertoire. So I feel a bit the same about then conducting, because having had that position and getting to know all these composers, it's almost like I have a set of keys and a responsibility, because the career conductors, they have a lot of pressure that, you know, oh, we want you to do Mahler's cycle, or you should do so sometimes they can't program so freely.
No, they can't. That's correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
But they do have a great almost monopoly on programming, and programming is incredible fun. I mean, that's huge fun. And then if I can use some of my keys, and the few times in a year that I conduct, do programs where some music will be played that wouldn't have been played otherwise, or will be put on the wall in a light where it will make more sense than if you just did it in a reservoir for only that music, so that then became the what I really take pleasure out of doing.
And other than thinking about videoing yourself and deciding not to, on Gary's very good advice, did you at any stage speak to somebody like Gary, who you trust, or, you know, even a friend like Andres Nelsons, and say, look, just how am I doing? Am I conducting well? What do you think I should be doing? Did you seek advice, or even go to a conducting teacher? I don't know. What were your thoughts?
I mean, I always spoke to Gary about things, and there's sometimes, I remember the very first being Soldier's Tale, and he would have advised that, you know, beware that page turn.
Yes.
Because that's always what comes in the bassoon there is, however well you know the piece, that will always throw you off if you're not careful, that page turn.
Simple bits of advice like that are they're gold, because, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, around the time when I started to think about it more seriously, Leif Segerstam was chief conductor of the opera here in Malmö. So one day I walk into the pit, and he didn't want to leave the pit. Difficulties. He was eating his sandwich in his stool in the pit, and I had played with him many times, and he, you know, I think he we enjoyed each other's company. But I woke up to him and I say, "Hey, Leif, I think I'm thinking a little bit about conducting. But maybe you could give me some advice." Because he was, of course, teacher in Sibelius Academy.
That's right, yes.
And I say, why do you want to do that? And I couldn't really answer, but so he said, well, and I said, but you are the one to give me some advice. And he really resisted. It took me about 10 minutes to convince him that no, I really would like to. So he said, okay, we start now.
Yeah.
Conduct 4. 4 beats for me. So, I also had my idea of what sort of conductor I was going to be.
Yes.
I was going to be the organizer of tricky pieces. So I wanted to have it be very clear.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, Boulez was a hero. So there I was going, the 3.
Yeah, very clear cross beat with the hand.
So Leif said, no. There's no sound in that 3. He said, down, center,
second beat to the left,
second, same distance.
Across to the right for the third.
Yeah. Up, down.
Yeah.
And with his sausage fingers, very. Practice that until Sunday.
Wow. Just 4 in a bar. Yeah.
By this time, the orchestra is starting to come back into the pit. So there they see, the chubby conductor eating a sandwich with the famous trumpet player in front of it.
Beating 4 in a bar. Trying to work on the transition between the second and third beat of the bar of 4. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So then he said, good. And then we meet in my flat on Sunday.
Yeah.
So I come to his flat on the Sunday, and then he said, so what are you conducting? So I had this thing, I was going to conduct Dumbarton Oaks.
Yes, yeah.
So he puts on a record on Dumbarton Oaks, I think Pavojärvi version, and he sits down in his sofa, and he said, you conduct me, and you give me all the cues, and so we start, and first he gives me a little, again, on that 3, and I said, So, and then we come into the busy bits of the changes. So he sits back and then he says, shit, you are gifted.
Oh dear. That sounds very much like Segerstam.
and then I felt like a little boy again.
Yeah, I bet you did.
When I was playing the trumpet and someone said, yeah, you can do this.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
So that was and then with him, with Andres, with Gary, with some other people, I will always discuss scores.
Yeah.
I was working here in Malmö with Martin Brabins, and I know that he's a good teacher. So
yes, yeah.
I asked him to have a look, and see if I was doing something completely silly. And then he gave me a few of those exercises, from Russia.
From the Nielsen school, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the circles and all that. And that was very good, because when you get that sort of automatic movement into, you think less about it when you when you're doing it. So.
Well, that's brilliant. I mean, that wonderful that Segerstam took you under his wing after your 10 minutes of prodding and poking, but eventually he did. But that, what a wonderful way to sort of learn, and also to have these amazing people that you can ask, and they're so willing to give you advice. I mean, the first time I saw you conduct, I was still playing before I stopped playing in 2014, and you came to Birmingham and you played and conducted the Haydn trumpet concerto with us, and I was playing in the orchestra. How much when you conduct during the year, because obviously you're still playing your concertos and still a soloist, and very much so. But when you conduct, do you still play and conduct a lot more than just conducting? Or, for instance, do you do concerts where you do the whole thing, you conduct the whole thing, but the concerto is you playing and conducting? I mean, how does it work for you? And if I take it a little bit further, have you got any thoughts about transitioning further away from playing the trumpet and more into conducting, or is that not even on the cards at the moment?
It's very simple. My market value as a trumpet player is much higher than my market value. but as I said, I do enjoy the programming side of things.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the in the beginning, it meant always playing and conducting.
Yeah.
And then, because I'm always slightly too ambitious in the, I do these crazy programs, and they do take, I mean, those weeks are killers, because you have to keep in shape, which means so many hours still playing, and then entire days of rehearsing, and very often music that the orchestra does not have as a repertoire. And it will be crazy programs. I mean, I did one here. There was that very warm summer in 18, and I was reading Stefan Zweig's The World of Yesterday, this incredible book. And he talks about the outbreak of the First World War. And he says it was a summer without clouds. And the book goes on, and it comes to the outbreak of the Second World War. And he said it was another summer without clouds. And there I was in 18, and it looked like, the world was really, and, we are still worried about the world. And so I was thinking I have to express my worry somehow. And I wanted to make a program. So I devised this program. If you don't mind, I will tell it, because it's that's how I'm thinking about those programs. So I start with the Hummel Concerto, which is 18-3. Things are fine, and then Perpetuum Mobile. We are in Austria after all, so
the
Perpetuum,
Strauss,
that goes straight into Gruber's Charivari. Where he takes the Perpetuum Mobile, but it's being kidnapped by the brown shirts.
Okay, right.
And it crashes, and real disaster happens. Intermission, Webern Passacaglia, then Krennic Fourth Symphony.
Wow.
Which is like Mahler. He sits in America and he writes this Mahler is wrong. It is really the world of yesterday that has gone wrong. So the idea of the program was great, and I told the program to Gruber, and he said, "That's completely suicidal."
Yeah, but I want to hear it.
No, it went really. It was taken by Swedish radio. I don't know if it's still there on some site, but it was. But of course, a week like that really takes it completely out of me.
I can imagine.
So So I've tried. I try a little bit now to get at least now and again a week where I then only conduct. We'll see. The cactus will have the life that it will. Thibaut in Paris, he always said that for the trumpet, one lifetime is not enough. And I think he's very much right about that. I suspect that it's the same with conducting.
Yes.
So whatever life that takes, it's for me, it's like a bonus.
In an earlier episode, I had the great pleasure of speaking to Barbara Hannigan, the soprano, who along with you, I would imagine, I can't think of that many people who have commissioned so much new music, which means that at some point you will have received your probably a full score, if it's an orchestral piece, with maybe a piano reduction and your own trumpet part, and you need to learn it from scratch. When you come to learn a new score to conduct, do you use a similar system for learning it? Do you flick through it and look at the bigger picture and then go into details? Or do you use a completely different system for conducting as opposed to trumpet learning? And the other thing that the conducting geeks like to hear is, do you write things in your scores? Do you use colors and all of the hieroglyphics that I use? Or are you like other conductors I've spoken to who use nothing and they commit it all into their massive minds, which I frankly can't do? What do you do?
I did. It's similar to what I did with the trumpet at the very first stage, because it's basically staring at it.
Yes.
For a long time. And depending, of course, if it's something completely unknown or if it's known. But then at that same time, it's also gathering all sorts of surrounding material that can be, reading appropriate literature, listening to that, all that sort of things. And if it's repertoire music, I do listen to a lot of recordings and see what I like and what I don't like, and then comes the stage where I do write in, and I think then comes the more precise learning when I do that, because then I look at every bar and try to see. I mean, we are there to help. So how can I? What's the best possible way to help here, and without becoming too much of a, not helping in the way that you become a school teacher. But anyway, I do write in. I do have some colors. I have blue and red.
All of us color users, I think blue and red, they easily pop off the page. I mean, I use my colors and when I write things in. I think it helps me learn.
Same here.
So it helps. I remember I could be in a rehearsal and I remember writing something in. I remember how I wrote it in and where I was and what time of day it was, and it just helps you form your plans. For some other conductors, it doesn't work like that. But I think whatever you do, I
do the same in the trumpet parts. So it's a system that I have taken on also, and then if I have time, I let it rest and come back to it. That is an important part, but it's rare that it happens.
I agree with you. I think if you can. My ideal score prep would be to start learning it 6 or 9 months in advance before when I have to conduct it in the concert. Do the hard work then, and then leave it for 2 or 3 months. Come back to it, flick through it, maybe add some more little things. Leave it for another couple of months, and then the week before you open it and carry on. And it sort of by osmosis works its way into me. That's how but sometimes you don't have that luxury as a conductor. You get the phone call, can you come in 3 days time? And you of course you say yes. You got to learn it in 3 days. But
and I think very important for me in the preparation is also to have a very solid view of things, how I think they go, but also to be prepared for a completely unexpected ball being thrown at me. Let's say there's this wonderful oboe player in this orchestra who suddenly plays something that I've never heard like that, and then to be able to pick that up and throw it on and react. I think those are the most gratifying moments in music making. And if you're too stuck in your own opinion, then you deprive yourself of that.
Absolutely perfect. And I love the analogy of being thrown a ball, you catching it and then throwing it on. I think that's a brilliant analogy. And if you don't mind, I'm going to steal it. But that, to me, that's what good conducting or great conductors do, is that they take what comes at them, even if it's not necessarily their primary thought about how that corner of music or bit of music might go, but then you take it and realize, hey, this is interesting. We can now do this as a consequence, or I can throw the ball in that direction rather than where I was going to throw it in a different direction. And it means that you're involved with the music making on the stage. And as I wrote only this morning for an online lecture I'm giving later this week, conducting is not about learning a dance routine that you might learn to go on Strictly Come Dancing. It's not that. It's about having some ideas about what you might need to conduct at a certain time, but being totally involved in what's happening and being, as you said, ready to help if they need your help, and then ready to step back out of the way if they don't need your help, and just, that's what it should be about.
Yeah.
Håkan, it's 10 questions time, so I will start at the beginning, as always. What sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
I was thinking about that one. I mean, to most of your 10 questions, I will have too many answers. I'm one of those. I'm a little bit like Van Gogh when in the letters between him and his brother, his brother asks him what painters he likes.
Yeah.
And he has a list of about 45 of them that he really likes. And I'm a little bit like that, but I do love being at the beach in the summertime and almost slumbering and hearing the waves, the sound of the waves. And if then there's also the sound of laughing children. There's nothing that is so... there's an old record with a Swedish singer-songwriter, and he starts the mix of one of his songs with just children laughing, and you immediately feel hopeful. So that is, and then I guess like everybody else, bird song is also in that category.
And a sound you particularly dislike or even hate?
Me playing a wrong note.
Oh dear. But then here's a serious question, Håkan, because we're giggling away, but here's a serious question. If it's a world premiere, I know you're a perfectionist, but if it's a world premiere and you play a wrong note, there's only two people, well, possibly three with the conductor, if there's only three people in the room who know that it's a wrong note that night. So, at least in a world premiere, you could argue that, that it matters slightly less. But I suppose you're going to tell me, no, it should matter all of the time.
It does matter all the time. But on the other hand, that's the beautiful thing of music, isn't it? Yes. I mean, there is no such a thing as perfection. We there's a friend of ours who works also with sort of coaching people, and she was very interested in the perfection of classical music, because and that's what that's the misconception that also jazz players have about us, that we're all into the perfection side of thing all the time. And of course we have to be, but we also make, every performance, even if I play a Haydn that people think is good, I will think that it's full of little, we make mistakes all the time.
Yeah. That's true. So true. Yeah.
And we hate it, but we certainly have to live with it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the other, sticking with this for a little while, going from being a player in the middle of the second violin section of an orchestra to then going to be a conductor, when you're playing in the middle of a section, and of course there are other instruments flying through your airspace, like oboes and clarinets and trumpets from the back and all this sort of stuff, it's like being in the middle of an engine, and you hear that there are springs that are complaining, and you hear that there are valves that are maybe not working particularly well. You hear the little clicks and bangs and whirs. You then stand on the podium and you hear none of that at all. You might hear the odd occasional clonk, to use the engine analogy, and think, oh, something's gone wrong there. But you hear much less of those tiny things. And it's the same, I'm sure, when you're a soloist, you think, well, I just clipped that note, or it didn't come, I didn't perfectly center it. We, the audience, have no idea that you're thinking that at all.
No, certainly shouldn't. It's a balance act, because like Maria Callas said, the audience hasn't paid to see us try. That's of course is true. But on the other hand, I think we, in our education, we are not so good at handling this fact. I mean, there's too much. We want to be perfect, and we should always try to be perfect. But there is such an obsession around it that has been made worse, of course, with recordings, and that we are almost. I think it's part of the problem why we, as an art form, have more difficulty in renewing ourselves, as opposed to other art forms, is our seeming obsession with perfection.
Yeah, well, and as you said, it's almost impossible to attain it. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant answer. So from giggling about your original answer, we got to something quite deep and profound, which is
thank you.
That's good. If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
Again, I can't give one answer. I mean, I find to be able to give as much as possible of myself in my profession, and even as a human being, you need to fill up, so whatever possibilities. I mean, I do read a lot, but if I am in a big city, a big European city or American city where there is great opera or great galleries, and I will search any possible way of having an experience myself of great art to be able to fill up. But and then I love cooking, and I love eating, and I love nature, and I think very much more that it's a sort of balance act that needs to be. You need to be able to listen to what you need at this time, so that the balance is not upset.
That's right. Yeah. Well, we may well come back to cook. Well, we will be coming back to cooking and eating in question 10, as you well know. Who would be a favourite conductor of yesteryear?
Kleiber is the obvious answer. Yes. I think everybody will say, and I think his idol, Karajan, people don't maybe speak so much about anymore, but I mean, some of those, especially, I mean, the early opera stuff from Italy, and I mean, it's unbelievable. And I often turn to Bernstein there's some solutions in Bernstein. Charles Dutoit, the recordings he did in Montreal of the French stuff. There's some very great things there. I think it's endless. This, I find it so interesting that what they did with time.
Yes,
I think they had more of it. They had more of it in rehearsal time. So in a very practical sense, they had more time.
That's very true.
They managed to fill that time without looking silly. They also had a different perception of time. They were living often a slower life. If we look a long time back, you took the boat to America, and you.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think the whole perception of time was different, and I find that very interesting to listen to how time is proportioned and.
I'm going to let you get away with Charles Dutoit because you're talking about recordings that were made a long time ago, but he is still, of course, still around. So I'm going to count that as one of your answers for the next question, which is, who would be a favourite current conductor?
I mean, we have mentioned some of the ones that I love working with, Andres and Daniel and John Sturgarts. I think I think he has the world record in trumpet concertos. He's done over 20 different trumpet concertos with me. I always enjoyed playing with David Zinnemann, who was a fantastic accompanist. He would, if there was something in the text inviting to do this or that, he would just look over and sort of, are you going to do it or not? It was really great. Andres is like as you know, a volcano.
Yeah.
And you can have the same, huge concerto by Dean or Ariel, and you've played it 3 nights in a row, and you're going to play it the 4th night, and you're starting to feel, God, this is going to be.
Yeah.
And then he comes on the podium, and it's another volcano.
What is the hardest work you have ever conducted?
I think the difficulties are often unexpected.
Yes.
I found one of the most difficult pieces I've ever conducted was the Nielsen Flute Concerto, because it's such a surprise all the time what happens.
Yeah.
And then I haven't done a lot of it, and I don't know that I will, because I found it hugely difficult. It's Mozart, which everybody says it's so crystal clear, but where Beethoven is so solid in his mathematics and periods,
yeah.
Mozart never is.
No.
And which also I love that fact that, because people who don't like any music written after Sibelius or considered Rachmaninoff for modern music, they will say, well, I don't understand it, meaning that we understand Mozart. I really don't.
Yeah, it's
it is gorgeously beautiful, and it sounds like nature itself, but it's so unexpected what happens.
It can be like trying to catch water, can't it? To try and
yes.
get it exactly how you hear it, how, of course there's these cliches about it needing to be crystal clear and clean and tidy and all of that. It's not that, it's something else. There's something else you've got to catch, and it does make it so hard to do.
Yeah. And then you can argue that, well, all those qualities should also be in a new piece or in a Stravinsky score or whatever, that on top of that has the changing meters. And
yes.
I think all music is potentially very, very, very difficult.
When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
It's the easiest question of all, my trumpet.
So even if you're just going to conduct, you would take your trumpet with you. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I mean,
you wouldn't just take a mouthpiece to keep your chops sort of vaguely in order. You would actually take the trumpet in practice.
I need much more than that to not have too much backwater. I really and I like it. It's part of the health system. Yeah.
Are you one of those people who, if you went on a 2-week holiday or vacation with your family, or just you and your wife, would you still take your trumpet with you then? If I plopped you in the middle of the Maldives for 2 weeks on an all-inclusive holiday, would you still take your trumpet with you then?
Yes, because because my wife would force me to do it, because she says, if you don't, you're such bad company. No, there's something, I used to be, when the kids were small and we would do this summer, I could take longer times off, and I knew exactly what to do and all that. Now I just find that I accept the fact that I am more or less a walking trumpet, and I feel more complete. Even if it's or if it was in the Maldives, I would probably only do just half an hour in the morning and get it done with, just to keep everything soft and not having to worry too much. It just keeps me, again, I try to keep the balance somehow.
What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
Well, I first have to become one. I'm not.
All right. Well, let's change the question slightly for you. What is the one thing you would change about the conducting profession? I've stumped you.
No. This is I think is very important. I think that conductors have become almost too important, in that never before in music history were the composers so unimportant.
Yeah, yeah.
And the conductor so important. It's been like a shift in the food chain.
Well, how many times do you see a CD cover now where the conductor's name is in the largest font of all, then possibly the pieces that are on the CD, and then the composer's name is in the smallest font of all, which is completely wrong. It should be totally round the other way.
And also that was, as I said, that is one of the reasons I like doing it, is to have the possibility to do programs, because that is very much in the power of the conductors now. And I think with power comes responsibility, and it's a difficult balance so I think we need to think about that one. How important should conductors be, in the music? Composers should all conduct or play. I think is very important. I think the organic side of music life is very important. If possible, we should all compose and play and conduct, so then we understand each other, and then the plant will grow better, and we will stay as a art form.
And then we'll all have, two cactuses, one either side, whether one of them is a conducting cactus and a composing cactus, and you're a player, or whatever. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, look in history of what composers, where the music has really remained, with very, very few exceptions. They have been active musicians in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Conductors or players, and I think it's necessary.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I always said that I would. I could have a restaurant at some point. I do like to make people happy with food. But again, there is no. When I turned 50, there's also in cooking, there is no shortcut. I mean, when I like music, I must tell you this story. When I turned 50, my son Martin organized for me to be like the lowest level in one of the best restaurants in Malmö for 2 days. So I walk in the morning, and the chef there, he had no idea who I was at all. So, but I had eaten in that restaurant several times, and I was confident, and I said, I can probably do that or that dish in the evening service. And so it was 9 a.m, and what can I do? I said. So he comes and he has this big barrel of peas. He said, you can split these peas. Okay. So that took, same at the time we were talking about food. I really learned a lot.
Yeah.
But then I'm done. What can I do now? And he comes with a second one. And it became very clear that no shortcuts into his kitchen.
No.
And then we talked about all sort of base things, and his deliverers came in, and I could see his menu forming in his head. And I learned a hell of a lot in those 2 days, but I never cooked in the evening.
No.
And this was, funnily enough, it was around the same time as Leif with his 4 beats.
With his 4 in a bar, yeah.
So split the piece and do the 4 in the bar.
And did the chef ever find out who you were?
Yes, he was terribly embarrassed.
Well, an answer could never possibly ever be give a better segue into question 10, which is, if the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Well, it would be the company,
Of course,
for sure. And then we would certainly drink champagne to celebrate.
Yes.
life
Yeah.
itself. And I would have oysters, but not everybody likes oysters. I love them very much. So maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
But you're right, the company is important, and champagne
That-
and oysters is, yeah, I'd be with you.
Yeah.
Definitely. That sounds wonderful. Håkan, what a pleasure it's been. I know we've met previously in the past. In fact, I vividly remember the first time I'm meeting you. You were playing the trumpet part in the Shostakovich concerto, the piano concerto with the trumpet, and you were sitting directly in front of me, blocking my view of the conductor. And you know, I had a good chat, and I've met you on numerous occasions since, and it's been a real joy today. Thank you for coming on, and I hope to see you very soon.
I hope to see you soon. I hope we come back to real life music making soon.
Yeah.
And can I end with a quote of something very uplifting that I heard the other day?
Yes, please do.
Which I think has to do with how we will meet again. It says, life is not about waiting for the clouds to pass. Life is about learning how to dance in the rain.
That's brilliant. That's wonderful.
So I hope we will dance in the rain soon, Mike.
I'm sure we will. Thank you. A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat with a conductor who has been one of the major figures of British classical music life, as well as across the globe, for the last 40 years or so. He's held title positions in the UK, US, Canada and Australia in both the concert hall and the opera house, as well as conducting the last night of the proms on no fewer than 12 occasions. But until then, bye-bye.